Lassie Farm. This is an amazing book called Postcards by Annie Proulx. She's a pretty famous author. The Shipping News, other books that have been turned into movies. This is copyright 1992. And even before he got up, he knew he was on his way. Even in the midst of the involuntary, orgasmic jerking, he knew she was dead, knew he was on his way. Even standing there on shaking legs, trying to push the copper buttons through the stiff buttonholes, he knew that everything he had done or thought in his life had to be started over again, even if he got away. He couldn't get any air, but stood on his knocked-out legs, gasping and wheezing. It was like he'd taken a bad fall, dazed. He could feel the blood hammering in his throat, but there was nothing else, only the gasping for breath and an abnormal acuity of vision. Mats of juniper flowed across the field like spilled water. Dog-hair maple crowded the stone wall, wavering through the trees. He'd thought of the wall walking up the slope behind Billy, thought of it in a common way of working on it sometimes, setting it back in place, the stones that frost and thrusting roots had thrown out. Now he saw it as a scene drawn in powerful ink lines, the rock fissured with crumpled strings of quartz, humps of moss like shoulders shrugging out of the mold, black beneath rotten bark, the aluminum sheen of dead wood. A stone the size and shape of a car's back seat jutted out of the wall, and below it was a knob of soil that marked the entrance to an abandoned fox den. Oh, Jesus, it wasn't his fault, but they'd say it was. He grasped Billy's ankles and dragged her to the wall. He rolled her up under the stone, could not look at her face. There was already a waxiness to her body, the texture of her bunched stockings. The shape of her nails glowed with the luminous hardness that marks the newly dead in the moment before the flames consume or the sucking water pulls them under. The space beneath the rock was shallow. Her arm fell outward, the hand relaxed, the fingers curled as if she held a hand mirror or a 4th of July flag. Instinctively, he translated the withering shock into work, his answer to what he did not want to understand, to persistent toothache, hard weather, the sense of loneliness. He rebuilt the wall over her, fitting the stones, copying the careless tumbled fall of rock. A secretive reflex worked in him. When she was locked away in the wall, he threw on dead leaves, tree limbs, and brush, raked the drag marks, and scuffed ground with a branch. Down the back fields, keeping to the fence line, but sometimes staggering onto open ground. No feeling in his legs. The sun was going down. The October afternoon collapsed into evening. The fence posts on the margins of the fields glinted like burnished pins. The thick light plated his face with a coppery mask. Grass eddied around his knees. The purple burst, scattering a hail of seed. Far below, he saw the house, vanished with orange light, balanced against the grove of cottonwoods, like a scene etched on a metal plate. The sag of the roof curved into shadows as delicate as a bloom of mold, thickening the trees. In the orchard, he knelt and wiped his hands over and over in the coarse grass. The trees were half wild with water sprouts and dead wood. The mournful smell of rotted fruit came into his nose. "If I get away," he said, dragging breath into his constricted throat, and briefly seeing not what had happened up beside the wall, but his grandfather spraying the tree with a Bordeaux mixture, the long wand hissing in the leaves, the poisoned moths bursting up like flames, the women and children himself on ladders, picking apples, the strap of the bag cutting into his shoulder, the empty oak splint baskets under the trees, and the men loading the full baskets into a wagon, the frigid packing room, old Rose Boy with his sloping bare neck and dirty hat pointed like a cone, nothing but a trimmed up old syrup filter, tapping on the barrel head, serious, saying over and over, "Take it easy now. One rotten apple spoils the whole goddamn barrel." Evening haze rose off the hardwood slopes and blurred a sky discolored like a stained silk shirt. He saw and heard everything with brutal clarity, yet the thing that had happened up beside the wall was confused. Coyotes, singling along the edge of the duck marsh, called in fluming howls. Wet hand tickled the skeleton bean poles he walked through the withered garden. Moths, like pinches of pale dust, battered in his wake. At the corner of the house, he stopped and urinated on the blackened stalks of Jewel's Canterbury bells. The seed husks rattled and a faint steam rose in the trembling shadow of his legs. His clothes had no warmth. The gray work pants, knees stained with soil, were stippled with grass heads and stickers, his jacket spattered with shreds of bark, his neck stung from her raking scratches. A gleaming image of her fingernails swerved into his mind, and he clamped it off. The cedar waxwings rustled stiff leaves with a sound of unfolding tissue paper. He could hear Mink's voice in the kitchen, lumps of sound like newly plowed soil, and the flat muffle of Jewel, his mother, answering. Nothing seemed changed. Billy was somehow up there under the wall, but nothing seemed changed except the uncanny sharpness of his vision and the tightness that gripped somewhere under his breastbone. A length of binder twine hung with bean plants sagged between the two porch pillars, and he could see each hemp fiber, the shadows in the folds of each desiccated leaf, the swell of the seed inside the husks. A broken pumpkin crusted on its underside with earth, parted like a mouth in a knowing crack. His foot crushed a leaf as he opened the screen door. Wire egg baskets were stacked in the corner of the entry. Water had drained from a basket half full of pale eggs and pooled under Mink's barn boots. The reeking barn clothes, Dub's jacket, his own denim coat with the pocket gaping open like a wound, dangled from nails. He scraped his shoes on the wad of burlap sacks and went in. "About time, you loyal. You and Dub can't get to the table on time. We're not waiting. Been saying that since you was 4 years old." Jewel pushed the bowl of onions toward him. Her hazel eyes were lost behind the glinting spectacles. A ridge of muscle that supported her lower lip was as stiff as wood. The white plates made a circle around the kitchen table. The shape echoed in the curve of grease around Mink's mouth. There was a stubble on his face. His finely cut lips were loosened by missing teeth. The dull silver lay on yolk-colored oilcloth. Mink clenched the carving knife, sawed at the ham. The ham smelled like blood. Cold air crawled along the floor. The ferret scurried in the wall. On a hill miles away, an attic window caught the last ray of light, burned for a few minutes, dimmed. "Pass your plates," Mink's voice, gone thin since his tractor accident a few years ago, seemed caught in some glottal anatomic trap. He tensed his neck, creased across the back and black and white lines, and cut at the ham. The label on his overall bib read, "Tough Nut." The red slices fell away from the knife onto the platter. The glaze crackled by heat and crazy hairlines. The knife was thin-bladed, the steel sharpened away. Mink felt its fragility against the ham bone. Such a worn blade could easily break. His pallid gaze, blue as winter milk, slid around the table. "Where's Dub, goddamn knockabout?" "Don't know," Jewel said, hands like a cluster of carrots, shaking pepper out of a glass dog, straight in her chair, the flesh of her arms firm and solid. "But I'll tell you something, anybody that's late to supper can go without. I cook supper to be eat hot, and nobody bothers to take the trouble to set down when it's ready. Don't care who it is. They're not here. They can forget it. Don't care if it's St. Peter. Don't care if it's Dub's gone off again. Thinks he can come and go as he pleases. He don't care for nobody's work. I don't care if it's Winston Churchill with his big greasy cigar wants to sit down to dinner. We're waiting for nobody. If there's something left, he can have it, but don't expect nothing to be saved." "I don't expect it," said Murnell, squinting her eyes. Her braids were doubled in loops, bound with rubber bands that pulled painfully when they were worked loose at night. The teeth too big for the face. She had the family hands with crooked fingers and flat nails. She had Mink's diffident slouch. "Nobody's talking to you, miss. You make some money on the milkweed pods, and you've got to put your 2 cents in on every subject. How money does change a person. Glad I haven't got any to spoil me." "I've got more good stuff going than the milkweed pods," said Murnell scornfully. "I got 3 big things this week. I got $6 for the milkweed pods. I got a letter from Sergeant Frederick Hale Bottom in New Guinea. He read my note with the Sunday school cigarettes, and our class is going to see the rubber show in Barton on Friday. How many milkweed pods you picked for that $6? Mink pulled off his barn cap and hung it on the chair. A freak of hair hung down, and he continually jerked his head to the left to get it out of his way. "Hundreds, thousands, 30 bags, and guess what, Da? Some of the kids turned in milkweed that was still green, and they only give 'em 10 cents a bag. I let mine get all nice and dry up in the hayloft first. The only one picked more than me was an old man from Top Under. 72 bags, but he didn't have to go to school. He could just fool around picking milkweed all day long. I wonder what in the hell all them milkweed pods was doing spread out on the floor up there. First I thought it was some idea Loyal had for cheap cow feed. Then I thought they was going to be some kind of decoration." "Da, they don't make decorations out of milkweed pods." "Hell, they don't. Milkweed pods, pine cones, spools, popcorn, apples. Throw some paint on it, that's it. I've seen women and girls make a goddamn hay rake into a decoration with crepe paper and poison ivy." The door opened a few inches, and Dub's florid, big-cheeked face thrust into the kitchen. In the thicket of his curly hair, a bald spot appeared like a clearing in the woods. He pretended to look around guiltily. When his eyes came to Jules, he twisted up his mouth in mock fear, sidling into the room with his arm crooked across his face as if to ward off blows. His thighs were heavy, and he had the short man's scissory walk. He knew he was the fool of the family. "Don't hit me, Ma. I'll never be late again. Couldn't help it this time. Hey, I got talking with a fella, said his uncle was one of the ones that was up on Camel's Hump when that bomber went down, looking for survivors of the crash. For pity's sake, said Jewel. Dub turned his chair around and straddled it, his good arm across the back, the empty sleeve usually tucked in his jacket pocket hanging slack. A Camel cigarette balanced behind his right ear. For an instant, Jewel remembered how shapely his forearms had been, the swelling flexors and the man's veins like tight, fine branchwood. Mink cut a slice of ham into pieces and scraped them onto Dub's plate. The kitchen seemed to Loyal to be a falling outward like a perspective painting, showing the grain of the ham, the 2 shades of green of the wallpaper ivy, the ears of drying popcorn joined together in a twist of wire hanging over the stove, the word comfort on the oven door, Jewel's old purse nailed to the wall to hold bills and letters, the pencil stubs in the spice can hanging from a string looped over a nail, Murnell's drawing of a flag tacked to the pantry door, the glass doorknob, the brass hook and eye, the sagging string and stained cretonne covering the cavity under the sink, the wet footprints on the linoleum, all flat and detailed but receding from him like torn leaves in a flooding river. It seemed that he had never before noticed his mother's floral print apron, the solid way she leaned forward, her beaky nose and round ears. They had those ears, he thought, every one of them, forcing his mind away from what was up under the wall, and Mink's black Irish hair, so fine you couldn't see the single hairs. Dub heaped the mashed potato on his plate, poured the yellow gravy over it, and worked it in with his fork. He stuck a lump of chewing gum on the edge of the plate. Plane was all over the mountain. One wing clipped a part of the lion, and then it just end-overed. Wings broke off here, tail further down, cockpit belly bunted half a mile down. Tell you what, they don't see how that guy lived through it. Guy from Florida just laying in the snow, guts and arms and legs from 9 dead men all around him, and all he had was a couple cuts and scrapes. Nothing even broke. Guy never even saw snow before. What lion? Asked Murnell, picturing the beast behind snowy rocks. The top of the mountain looks like a lion getting ready to jump. Other guy thinks it's part of a camel. The lion people wanted to call it Crouching Lion, but the camel lovers got their way. Camel's Hump. It's just stone up there, grade A granite. Looks like a pile of rock. Hey, don't look like a camel or a lion or a porcupine. Don't they learn you nothing in school? Seems like it's been a terrible time the last year or so for terrible things. The war, the chowder girl stabbing that needle in her eye. That was terrible. That poor woman in the bathtub in the hotel. Jewel unleashed one of her gusty sighs and stared away into the sad things that happened, that she guiltily savored. Her eyes were half closed, her thick wrists resting on the edge of the table, fork lying across her plate. "What about the fool thing?" said Mink, the words tangled in his mouth with potato and ham, the stub cheeks flexing as he chewed. "What about that fool that brought the can of blasting powder into the kitchen and put a match to it to see if it would burn? A fool thing and half the town on fire on account of it, and him and his brother's whole family dead or torn up." "What the hell is this?" said Dub, pulling something from the mashed potato on his plate. "What the hell is this?" holding up the bloodied Band-Aid. "Oh, my lord," said Jewel, "throw it out. Take some new potato. I cut my finger peeling potatoes. Then when I was setting the table, I see I lost the Band-Aid somewhere. Must have fell in the potatoes when I was mashing them. Give it here." she said, setting up and scraping the potato in the pig's slop bucket. She moved with a quick step, her lace-up Oxfords with the stacked heels showing off her small feet. Thought for a minute there that them taters had the rag on. Dub, said Jewel. I don't get it, said Murnell. I don't get what a bomber was doing near the Camel's Hump. Is there Germans on the Camel's Hump? Dub roared in his stupid way. Murnell could see the thing at the back of his throat hanging down the black parts of his teeth and the empty gums on the left where the train men had knocked his teeth out. Don't worry about the Germans. Even if they made it across the ocean, what the hell would they do up on the Camel's Hump? Ach, Heinz, I am seeking der blood farm and der dangerous Murnell, collecting the milkweed pods. Dub's grin hung in his face like an end of wet rope. The food lay on Loyal's plate as Mink sent it along, the ham hanging a little over the edge, a cone of potato rising, a single iceberg from a frozen sea. Loyal stood up, the yellow kerosene light reaching as high as his breast, his face shadowed. His leaf-stained fingers bunched, braced against the table. Got something to say. Billy and me has had enough of this place. We're pulling out tonight. She's waiting for me right now. We're pulling out and going out west. Someplace out there, buy a farm, make a new start. She got the right idea. She says, I'm not even going to try to see my folks. Suit me good if I never have to see one of them again. She's just going. I wanted to set it straight with you, give you some idea. I didn't come back for no goddamn dinner. Didn't come back to listen to horse shit about Germans and potatoes. I come back to get my money and my car. Ask you to tell her folks she's gone. She don't care to see them. And as he said it, he knew that's what they should have done. It seemed so easy now, he couldn't understand why he'd fought the idea. There was a silence, a discordant spread across the table as though he had blindly hit piano keys with a length of pipe. Mink half stood. The hair hung down over his eyes. What in hell are you saying? This your idea of a joke? All I ever hear from you is, for 10 years is how you think this place ought to be run. Now you say, like you was talking about changing your shirt, that you're pulling out. For 10 years I've been hearing about what you wanted to do with this place, how you wanted to switch off the Jerseys over to Holsteins, get a milking machine after the war, as soon as we get electricity in, specialize in dairy, get the pastures and hayfields up, alfalfa, build a silo, grow more corn, concentrate on commercial dairy farming, profit. Put the time into dairying, don't bother with no big gardens or pigs or turkeys. It's quicker and efficienter to buy your food. I can hear you saying it now. You said it until my ears turned blue. Now listen, you expect me to swallow this like sweet cake? Hey, mister, tell you what else you said. You bitched and whined about the juniper moving into the fields, talk half an hour about the orchard, suckers, deadwood, the bull spruce is choking out the spring in the pine tree corner, you said. West hayfields ain't coming in, ain't been cut in 3 years, full of cherry trash. That's what you said. Said you wish the day had 40 hours of light so you could get something done. Loyal hardly heard him, but saw the rubbery folds from the wings of his nostrils to the corners of his mouth. You can't leave us to run this farm alone, said Mink in his buzzing voice, the self-pity getting into his rage. Jesus Christ, your brother's only got one arm, and my health is down since the damn tractor laid on my chest. I was up to my health, I'd beat shit out of you. You're not worth a pig's patootie. You tell me how in hell Dub and me can hand milk 19 cows alone, 2 of them damn Holsteins of yours. The one holds her milk back and kicks. Christ, I hate that cow's eyes. You son of a bitch, we just can't do it. God damn it, the Holsteins are good-natured cows, better than them mean little Jerseys you got. They damn near give twice as much milk as any Jersey. He tumbled into the relief of the old argument. Yes, and look how much they eat, and half the butter fat of the Jerseys. The Jerseys is made for this country. They can make it out on thin pasture and keep a farm going. They're rugged. Tell you another thing. You just try walking off the farm. They'll have your ass in a uniform so fast it'll take your breath away. There's a war on. In case you forget, farm work is essential work. Forget out west. Don't you read no papers? Don't you hear no radio programs? Them out west farms dried up and blowed away in the Dust Bowl. You're staying. Dub popped a wooden match with his thumbnail and lit his cigarette. I gotta go, said Loyal. I got to Oregon or Montana, somewhere. Put the record on again, Charlie, said Dub. Everybody likes to dance to that one. The smoke streamed out of his nose. Jewel put her hands to her cheeks and drew down on them, stretching her face and exposing the red inner lids of her eyes behind her glasses. I don't know, she said. What about the army dinner? We're putting on the army dinner Saturday night. The big beef stew dinner in the cafeteria style, army style. I was expecting you to take me down to the church on Saturday morning. You could stay for that. Billy's one that wears the chef's hat and ladles out the food. She has to stay for that. It's on Billy's account we got to go tonight. There's certain reasons. No good to talk about it. I'm going. He leaned wildly at them, the black hair curling at the opening of his shirt where the blue-white skin showed. Well, Jesus Christ, I see the whole thing. You knocked her up. She wants to clear out so nobody don't know. There's a word to describe a fellow like you lets himself get backed into a corner where he can't turn around. The voice squeezed along, but I won't say it in front of your mother and sister. Hey, you leave, Loyal, said Dub. You're finishing off this farm. Well, I knew this was going to be like taking a bath in boiled shit, but I didn't know it was going to be this bad. Can't you understand nothing? I'm going. He ran up to the slant ceiling room he shared with Dub, leaving the ham on his plate, leaving his chair turned away from the table, leaving the fly-spotted mirror reflecting Murnell's face. He hauled out the old valise, opened it, and threw it on the bed, and stood a long minute with the shirts bunched up in his hands, the valise gaping like a shout. Down there, Mink was firing up, bellowing now, something smashing and rattling. Door to the pantry. Loyal dropped the shirts into the valise and afterward believed that was the moment when everything shifted, when the route of his life veered away from the main line. Not when Billy slumped beneath his blind rutting, but as the shirts collapsed in their cotton limpness. He found Dub's bottle in a boot in the closet, tightened the cap and tossed it in, working the stiff strap through the valise buckle as he came down the stairs. Double stride, hearing Mink hammering now, seeing the son of a bitch nailing the kitchen door shut so he couldn't get out. He was across the room in a few seconds. He kicked out the window and stepped over the raking glass onto the porch, leaving it all, the trap line, the rough little Jerseys, the 2 Holsteins with their heavy, flesh-colored udders, Dub's oily rags, the smell of old iron in the back of the barn, the wall up by the woods. That part of things was over. It was over in a rush. Down on the town road, he thought it was a sour joke how things had turned out. Billy, always yapping about moving away, getting out, making a new start, was staying on the farm. He, who'd never thought beyond the farm, never wanted anything but the farm, was on his way, clenching the steering wheel. Something was sticking in his backside, and he felt around, grasped Murnell's ocarina. The swirled novelty pattern of the bakelite scarred from kicking around the floor. On the sides were decals of donkeys carrying panniers of cactus. He started to crank down the window to throw it out, but the window slipped off the rail again when it was only a crack open, and he threw the ocarina into the back seat. It was almost dusk, but at the low place where the meadows swept the trees off to the sides, he pulled over to take a last look. He jammed the spurting flashes of what had happened. It had happened and was done. The place was as fixed as a picture on a postcard. The house and barn like black ships in an ocean of fields. The sky a membrane holding the final light, and there was the blurred kitchen windows, and up behind the buildings, the field. The rich 20-acre field, propped open toward the south like a Bible. The crease of the water vein, almost exactly in the center of the 10-acre pages. He fished in the valise and got Dub's bottle, swallowed the cold whiskey. Beautiful pasture, 4 or 5 years of his work to bring the field up. None of Mink's labor, his. Draining the boggy places, liming and seeding to clover, plowing under clover 3 years running to build up the soil, get the sourness out, then planting alfalfa and keeping it going. Look at it, sweet, good stuff, nutty, full of nourishment. That's what made those cows give the butter fat. Nothing Mink did but him, loyal, the best pasture in the county. But that's why he wanted to go up above the junipers. Even though Billy didn't care about the field and couldn't tell good fields from bad. Not to do what she thought he wanted, but to look at his pasture from above. "I've heard it all now," she said. "Looks like any stupid old field to me." She shook her head. "I don't know if I can make something out of you or not, Loyal." The field looked like black-green fur in the dull light. "That's your last look," he said. Laid Dub's bottle in the glove compartment and threw the car into first. Out of the corner of his eye, he half-marked a white dog up in the field, too big for a fox, wrong shape for a deer, and no stumps in that field. But he was 14 miles away from home and half across the bridge, stepping gingerly on the brake to keep from hitting a burr-covered stray before he figured it out, the dog. The dog was up in the field where he'd told him to sit, still waiting. Jesus Christ.